Good evening. We begin with what is being called the worst treatment scandal in the history of the NHS, a scandal that left nearly 3,000 people dead. A public inquiry has begun in London looking at how thousands of patients were given infected blood products during the 1970s and 80s. Many contracted HIV or hepatitis. It follows decades of controversy and allegations of a huge cover-up at the highest levels. Today, finally, victims' families, survivors and campaigners were getting the chance to have their say about the scandal, and it was emotional testimony.
I was affected by the fact that my husband, Tom, received contaminated blood products in late 60s, 70s.
Graham, he was a severe haemophiliac. And I had to go home to my mother and sit down with Graham and tell him at 15 that he got HIV.
We lost our granddad as a consequence of contracting HIV from the use of blood products. And as a result of that, as a consequence, my nan was secondary infected, who we also lost.
Well, our correspondent Paul Kelso is covering the inquiry, and we're just hearing moving accounts there of people involved. Paul, what is the chance of them really getting to hear the truth about all this?
They are certainly putting a great deal of faith in Sir Brian Langstaff, the inquiry chairman, achieving that with this inquiry, which in their view is so long overdue. Some of the people speaking today were infected as long ago as 30 years, and they feel that throughout that time no individual or institution has been effectively held to account, and the victims have had neither truth nor justice that they hope they will now receive. Many of them say this is their last chance, and certainly they were heartened by what they heard today, not just from Sir Brian Langstaff, but also from the tone of this opening. There was a commemorative event. We heard an excerpt from it there, but this was perhaps the first chance the victims of this inquiry have had to have a focal point. There is no one place this happened. The contaminated blood scandal is a story of thousands of individual tragedies. There's no monument, nowhere to remember them, so they welcomed that today. And then when Sir Brian Langstaff, the chairman, got to his feet, he gave a message that they will welcome, that the victims will absolutely be at the heart of this inquiry. He was also very clear that persistent allegations of a government cover-up dating back to the 1980s and to the Conservative administration, perhaps involving calling evidence even from Prime Ministers John Major and others, would be taken seriously. This is what he said.
I mentioned the allegation of cover-up. You should know that it is not only the law, but a central principle of mine, that this inquiry is independent of government. It is willing to hold people to account where appropriate, and it will express its views at the end without fear or favour, affection or ill will.
We'll have 2 days of opening statements from victims and their lawyers tomorrow and on Wednesday before the inquiry adjourns until the spring, when it will begin hearing evidence in earnest. It could take at least 2 years. This inquiry is vast. There are twice as many core participants, that is people with a personal interest in this case, twice as many, 1,200, than the sprawling child abuse inquiry. And there was a warning too today from Sir Brian that it could yet get bigger. The number of victims, there could be as many as 25,000 people who received transfusions in the 1970s and 80s, many of whom do not yet know that they are carrying hepatitis C. So while the list of victims will grow, so too, it's extremely likely, will the list of those who die before it reports. Already, since Theresa May announced this inquiry in July last year, at least 70 people have died.